Yas Prize awardees, it is so good to see you in Miami. We are thrilled to be doing this for the 4th time, and we are thrilled to have one of our favorite people of all time and such an incredible leader and a force for good in education, entrepreneurship, business, and humanity, I'd say, Governor Jeb Bush with us today.
I don't think the humanity part's on my Wikipedia page.
I think the humanity part's there. So what I'd love to do before we kind of kick off is I just want to give you guys a little context for what and why we brought Governor Bush here every year, and I think you guys are in for a treat. So many of you, first of all, raise your hand if you remember when this guy was governor of Florida. Okay, most. That's good. That's great. He actually tried to be governor before he became governor. And I think to Brene and Taylor's point earlier, he didn't give up. And I think that's what actually makes his story for education entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general a great one. So I actually want to start with you telling us why you do what you do, and maybe just like recount that loss, because loss is a great lesson.
Yeah. Well, welcome to, the reason I'm invited is I live 3 miles from here, so it makes it a little bit easier. But welcome to Miami. This has been my home since 1980. I got involved in business and in the community life. I happened to be the son of a presidential candidate in the day, and was involved as the Dade County Republican chairman. And I became Secretary of Commerce in 1987 and saw the power of being governor. And it dawned on me this would be the greatest public service job that you could ever have. And to this day, I still believe governors, I mean, all the other jobs are like the mayors get the crap kicked out of them because they're right at home. I mean, I have enormous respect for mayors because they're on the front lines. Presidents, you know, it seems like they just can't get anything done. DC is just so dysfunctional. Governors are where, in terms of public leadership, I think it's a great place. So I ran in '94, and I was one of 3 Republicans that year to lose. Mitt Romney lost to Ted Kennedy, some guy lost in California, and I lost. Everybody else won. So it was a humbling experience, and it was probably the best experience as an adult outside of my family. It was probably the best experience that I ever had, because also, you know, people gave me all sorts of reasons. There was some ugly stuff that went on in the campaign, and people said, you know, blamed that stuff on why I lost. And I didn't grow up that way, so I learned that I needed to be better if I was going to do this. I needed to show my heart. I needed to tell stories about why it's important to change the things I thought were broken. So in '94 when I ran, I had all these white papers with 10, 15-point plans. I mean, it was like full of just, I was throwing stuff out at people, and I forgot to tell them anything about me. In '98 I ran, and I learned this lesson. And I campaigned by listening and learning, which is a lot more fun, by the way. And I said, look, I'll campaign, I'll go raise money at night and do all the stuff you have to do, but I want to learn, I want to go. So I went to the child welfare, you know, the judges around the state, and sat with them and watched them for 6 and 7 hours try to preside over a broken child welfare system. I went to 260 schools. Do the math on that, in a year's time when summers, you know, schools are closed. And, you know, I had these radical views about voucherizing the entire funding. I think money, and today this dream is coming true. It's really kind of cool. Money should run with the parents and the child to the schools that they think are the best for them, for their children, rather than what the monopoly does. So I had these views. I went into the Lion's Den like 3 or 4 times a day, and I learned a lot. I grew, you know, I had a lot of appreciation for the beleaguered teachers in our system. I learned that we had really low expectations for our students. I always tell this story. There was a kid in Seminole High School, Seminole County just north of Orlando, that was studying for the HSCT test. And we were so proud in Florida that we had a high school graduation test in 1998. And it was an 8th grade level test. Like, okay, take a pause, take a breath. why are we bragging about a high school graduation test that is measuring 8th grade aptitude? I mean, like, no, we're very proud of it. So this poor kid, his name was Santiago. He was in the back of the school where they put the little computer screens in the very back in the kind of the basement of the school, and he was practicing for the last time he could take this test to graduate from high school. And I was watching over his shoulder, and the question he couldn't answer was, a baseball game starts at 3, it ends at 4:30, how long's the game? God, I mean, like, if you think about that, 12 years in school, and he couldn't answer that question. So it just validated my belief by listening and learning and interacting and being challenged by my views and defending my views. I could tell stories like Santiago's story and many others to help me connect with voters, but it also made me a better governor because I had the humility to actually not think I had it all figured out. So losing is always the best step to get better at things. Winning, you start thinking your poo doesn't smell. And particularly in public life, I mean, the amount of just butt kissing that goes on for mayors and governors and legislators, it's just outrageous. And sometimes they forget that they're as imperfect under God's watchful eye as everybody else. And those are the ones you want to avoid because it's just, that's not service. You lose your servant's heart if you think you're the master of the universe. And I always tried to stay humble. And thankfully I had a wife who's now, we've celebrated last February our 50th wedding anniversary. She always kept me humble too, thank God.
Congratulations. It's amazing you use that word because that was going to be my next question. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I want to make sure I turn it over to Gabriela Diaz, who I want you all to welcome as well. Gabriela is a junior here at Mater Brickell Academy.
Hey.
She is studying, as everyone here is, to go into business, and so I'm going to turn it over to her in 1 second. But I do want to call out the fact that humility was a pretty amazing aspect of your tenure, of your beginning. My first Jeb Bush story, speaking of wonk, you were a wonk, you still are actually a big wonk. There's very few governors or people at your level who actually can have a conversation about the difference between a piece of accountability, a norm reference test versus a formative test. Like any question he can answer, which is kind of cool, because when you are working in the policy and legislative arena, which we'll talk about later, people are like, yeah, that's in the bill, it's great. And Jeb's the kind of guy who can actually read it and go, yeah, no, that's not really in there. But I was working for a think tank, and you picked me up. Or maybe I just started CER. You came to the airport and picked us up because you wanted to talk policy for your run, which was really probably not a great idea because that's what made you lose, because you listen to people like us as opposed to going telling stories. But
I just
anyway,
told you why I lost.
I know. I know. But anyway, but it was really terrific to see you actually dig in, and it is so important that people dig into policy, right?
Yeah. No, and back to humility for a second, because we're in this political environment now where strength is defined by bluster. If you think about it, it's like, who's the big dog in the room? Who's the loudest voice? That's how it's defined by the press and the national press, at least. It's loudness, it's bluster, it's pushing people down. That's strength. And I think humility is actually an essential element in being strong, because it draws people towards a cause rather than. And now we have national elections where people are basically, I would guess 90% of the voters are voting against the other candidate. It's really not very healthy. That's not a sustainable democracy, I don't think, if you're just hating the other side to the point where when you don't win, you become even more embittered. And both sides seem to be doing this more often. So the first step would be have a servant's heart, be more humble, recognize that you don't have it all figured out, and draw people towards you that do, and get the best kind of results by listening to people. I know it sounds a little outdated and functionally obsolete, but I mean, what you all do, that's true. I mean, you can't like bluster your way through trying to set up and run a school. I mean, you have to have the leadership skills that you are acquiring by being great entrepreneurs aren't the same skills that we think are important in the political arena.
Hi, so I'm currently a junior here, and my future is to go into business. So to transition a little bit more about education, you said you visited 260 schools. What is one piece of advice you would give, not just to me, but to everybody here in the room that wants to go into business and wants to succeed in this level, in this field?
I'd say the first advice that when people ask me for advice, the first advice I always give is listen to your mother. It's just like, that's my default answer to all of life's questions. And once you get past that, the best advice that I have for your generation particularly is don't plan it all out. Don't like think you can plan it all out and has it, it's kind of a linear life where you got to go to school, you got to go to business school, you got to have a dog. You may have a boyfriend, but you can't like get married. You have to defer having children because it's not all planned out. Your generation and kids a little slightly older than you are not taking risk. They're not like embracing the unforeseen and unknown. So in business particularly, whatever your plans are, whatever the business plan is that you've set up, and you'll find this out because you built the business plan, right? And you're setting it up on next Friday. You're opening your cafe down here.
Yes, currently me and my fellow co-president, she isn't unfortunately here today, but we decided, we had one idea about 6 months ago. The idea was, let's open up a student-ran business to learn how it is to run a business in the education and student-teacher environment, and that's exactly what we did. So now next week we are successfully opening the Business Food Lab here in the cafeteria. Again, 100% student-ran, from the finances to, we built it all ourselves, so it's our proud project, and it just showed me a little bit about what business actually is and what it entails.
So, Gabrielle, here's the deal. So if you wrote a business plan and 3 months after you've launched it, you'll say, what the heck was I, like there'll be all sorts of things that are going to happen. Like people don't show up to work, someone didn't deliver the coffee, whatever. There's going to be 1,000 things that happen that you haven't planned out and figured out. And solving those problems and embracing the unforeseen and unknown is where joy comes. I mean, that's like that's the fun part of this. I think about my own life. I got married when I was 21 and 2 months, and my wife was 20. That's why I'm not 85 with the married 50 years. I'm still a spry 71-year-old. I got out of school in 2 years because I love my wife. I started working for a bank, and the guy comes, I was assistant to the chairman, and because I could write, which is another skill that no longer in your generation is that, used that much, but it gave me a job. And then the guy says, you're going down to Caracas, Venezuela, to open up an office for us. And I'm going, like, I never took a finance course much, I'm trying to sort this out in my head. I don't want to tell him no, but I can't tell him yes. So I said, can I at least talk to my wife tonight before I tell you yes? And we did it. And we took this huge risk. It was an incredible experience. I learned a tremendous amount. I gained confidence, and it wasn't all planned out. And so I think my advice to young people particularly is take the jump. Take the jump. 3 steps forward, 1 step back, 5 steps forward, 6 steps back. That's life's journey that is the most fulfilling. And if you think you're going to plan it all out, you never get off the sidelines. And then you mope around and you're just looking at the social media stuff and you're living this really superficial life. But you've done that. You've already started that journey and you're learning at this school, which is fantastic.
And doesn't that make you more flexible too? I think that lesson probably applies here. Put your entrepreneur hat on also, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Everything folks do, there's one of our speakers last year in a virtual accelerator, Carl Schramm. He wrote the book Burn the Business Plan, because we find so many, right? Burn the business plan.
What I just described.
Well, so many people are so tied to a particular set. I have to do this way and this next. I'm going to run a public school. I'm going to run a charter. I'm going to create this. I'm going to do an ed tech company. And they don't allow for variations. How do they, with all you've seen, and you host The incredible summit every year is coming up November. If you guys are not going yet, November 14th, 15th in Oklahoma City. We'll be there. But thousands and thousands of people that you interact with through your teams and other people, yourself through business, what can they learn? This is an accelerator. What do they need to know beyond what you just counseled Gabriella about to get to the next level?
Yeah, I think it's, I'm not suggesting don't have a plan, and you can write it down. I'm just saying that execute on it, and when circumstances change, because they will, have the adaptability. I'm just basically reiterating exactly what you said. Entrepreneurs do that really well. They take risk, they call audibles, they move forward, they fail. Many, like there's all sorts of belly flops. I don't know if Elon Musk, yeah, he failed once. But look at him now. I mean, the guy just launched this massive rocket. The booster comes down back in Brownsville, Texas. It's 220 feet tall. It's picked up, it's caught by a claw, like never been done before. And the rocket itself lands in the Indian Ocean, and it's retrieved perfectly. This was all done. No one else has done it. The guy had this vision because he wants to go to Mars. He took risks along the way. The first time that rocket launched, it didn't get off the pad. And I can guarantee you the Tesla efforts, he failed, I'm sure, miserably along the way. But he learned from it and adapted and changed and challenged. And I'm not sure I would want to work for the guy, but I'd like stock options, but I'm not sure I'd want to, like, he's a beast. He's incredibly just so focused on it, it's hard to imagine keeping up with him. But that's a good example of someone, kind of an exaggerated example. There are hundreds of smaller versions of that, thousands of them, millions of them in our country, which sets us apart from the rest of the world, by the way. We are more entrepreneurial in spite of all the wet blanket rules that people want to impose on small businesses and entrepreneurs. We still have it.
So if we're so entrepreneurial, why are we still at the bottom when it comes to education?
Because education, except for the entrepreneurs in this room and others that are beginning to, in the systems that are opening up around the country, are now excelling. It's basically a monopolized, it's a standardized, homogenized, government-run, union-driven, 13,000 monopolies. Not one, 13,000, which makes it even more difficult. I mean, that's the structure of it's not to say that good education doesn't happen in traditional public schools, but the organizing principle of how we govern the 74 million or whatever, 60 million public school students are in this structure that does not reward risk-taking, does not reward entrepreneurship. You have to have an extraordinary superintendent that breaks all the barriers and challenges all the rules and pushes back the union collective bargaining agreements to allow for some space for entrepreneurs to flourish. Whereas in places, I'm very proud of Florida because this county is the fourth largest school district in the United States, and 65, I think, % of the students, or 70% of the students, parents choose where their kids go to school. And if you look at the big urban school districts in the country, this is probably the best in terms of education outcomes. It's not a surprise to me that that's the case. So a parent here can go to great schools like this. I mean, how many K-12, you're K-12 or just high school? I can't remember. 6-12, business-oriented, entrepreneurial, public high schools. How many of those are around in the United States? How many, the micro schools that exist here are flourishing? The previous superintendent wanted to compete with the private virtual schools and the Florida virtual school, so he created his own virtual school. The charter school system here is flourishing. Thanks to the ESAs and vouchers prior to that, the Catholic school system is not closing schools here in the big urban areas, it's opening schools. We have a flourishing system where parents are empowered to make choices, and that creates the opening for entrepreneurs to flourish. That's new. I mean, you look at the 100-year history of, or whatever, 150-year history of public education, these last 20 years are brand new. Before that, in Florida, there were nothing. I mean, basically you went to the school that was assigned your kid was assigned to, and we were 50th out of 50 in high school graduation rate, and we were proud of our 8th grade level graduation test for a 12th grader.
But all that didn't happen without scars, right?
No, it was fun,
Because
fun fight.
Because sometimes it feels today to a lot of people, I'm not saying all of you, maybe some of you, that like, well, this has been around, or this is great. I'm gonna waltz in, and we got North Carolina's giving us money and charters, and we've got this state, and I'm in a great public school district, and I'm getting funds. And I think a lot of people don't realize that some of the hostility and toxicity that you see today was actually, I mean, the kinds of things they said about you in The Sky is Falling when you talked like this in 1998 was pretty incredible, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, politically, you want to be playing offense, and so I laid out my plan, and apparently it was controversial, and the incumbent lieutenant governor, my opponent, made my ideas the issue in the campaign, which I said, yeah, okay, fine, let's go do it. And I was, lucky to win, and then I declared a mandate. Whether it was because of my crazy views on education or not, I could make that legitimate claim, and that gave us the momentum to actually implement what we said we were going to do, which was very different than any other state. I mean, we were kind of the first to begin to open up the system. Now, it's pretty exciting. There's all sorts of states that are beginning to open up their systems, and I think we're going to have a renaissance of choices for parents, which I think ultimately is the best thing for students, because you all are going to figure out how to meet the needs of those parents and those kids far better than the system that's designed for the economic interest of the adults in the system. I mean, I would love to have the whole thing again. I mean, in 1993, I ran and I said I want to voucherize the whole public education system, and in 2024, I'll repeat it. I still think we ought to do it, and we're getting closer. Oh, by the way, just to say, the scars on my forehead, I don't know if you can see them, I'm pretty far removed from you guys, but in 98, or when I ran and for re-election in 2002, the union, the national union and the state union mortgaged their building in Tallahassee. They had 2 office buildings. They mortgaged it, and then I was the #1 target for the whatever the NEA or AFT. So they were the largest donor. The plaintiffs' lawyers, I guess, were second, but the unions nationally and in the state were the #1 donors against me. It was all mostly against me. And I won by really a nice margin, and they had to sell their building, which was like a drop the mic moment for me. I found that to be really hilarious.
And the largest share to date at that point of African American Hispanic votes in this county, as I recall, for any Republican.
We did pretty well. It was I don't know, it was a different era. Let's just put it that way, and you could work to draw people towards a cause about things that might have mattered to them. Now, it's harder. I don't know. I'm more depressed about. I'm hoping. I'd like to go 4 years in the future and look and take a peek to see. I mean, we got to do better, man. This is really ugly, and it's the contagion hasn't spread across the country to state and local races as much. But it could, and if it does, gosh, I mean, policy will be secondary to the food fight. Maybe we should ban social media, not just in schools, but the rest, just ban the damn thing altogether so we learn to interact like human beings again.
What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, to go off a little bit, we talked back there about how it's hard for our generation to have a conversation and look eye to eye because of the digital and of like the social media and everything like that. So can you elaborate a little bit more about the digital, that balance between working with the digital market, AI, for example, and how does that benefit local businesses and future businesses?
Yeah. Well, I think AI will be spectacular for education, spectacular, I mean, whether it's full of peril, but it's also full of enormous opportunities, and you have to be really aware of what the threat is and what the opportunities are, which means you got to be alive and aware. I mean, you can't just be immersed in your social media feed. We've had Jonathan Haidt come to our summit every year, or two of the last 3 years. He's the guy that's advocating. He basically laid out the case, so that I think it's pretty compelling, that since 2012, when this became kind of part of our lives, and social media exploded into our lives because of the computers that we wander around with these days, that kids began to be much more fragile. The combination of social media and the ease to access it, and then parents hovering over their kids, where they're not allowed to, they're not allowed to have free play. It's got to be all organized. There's this safetyism kind of notion that we're living in the most unsafe time in American history, when in fact the data suggests the exact opposite. My kids growing up were living in like the 60s, 70s, 80s was much more dangerous than it is now. But the perception is it's not. And so these children become teenagers obsessed with social media, and they're not resilient. They can't resolve disputes. They go to college. This is mostly for the elites, but they go to the elite schools. And then it turns out if you have a differing view than what they believe is true, then that's hate speech. They need safe zones. And you see this weird kind of conversion happening. And so what he advocates, and I do as well, is not allowing young people to have social media accounts till they're 16, and not allowing cell phones in schools during school hours. If we do those two things, we can begin to overturn this generational shift that is really problematic. I mean, dangerous for these young kids not being able to take advantage of opportunities. So for you, I mean, you're living like, you're learning the skills to be successful as a young adult in high school. Very few kids have that opportunity. And you'll have the chance, like you're going to be competing with kids that are like obsessed about who's saying what to them, and you know, boys that are accessing pornography at levels that their parents have no clue about, and young girls getting bullied on social media. The obsession that goes on inside that world is so dangerous. And all I got to do is, if you ask any of the great tech entrepreneurs that have created the social media revolution and the phones and all the things that take place out in Silicon Valley, none of them let their kids have access to social media, and none of them let their kids have phones during school hours. And it's been that way for a long while. They know a lot more about this than we do, and we need to like rise up and say enough of this. In the interim, though, you know, thank God you're at a school that is not forcing you to become weak. You're going to be resilient. You're going to be strong. You're going to be incredible.
I'm also wondering if people say no to you in school, like the expectations. Do you get corrected, right? So what is the secret to that gets you to be able to think strategically and be resilient?
I think it's really just the opportunity to, again, let go of that technology and kind of have the opportunity to use your critical thinking. When you're on your phone and you're on social media, that's all you're really thinking about, what other people are going to think about you, what other people see about you, and things like that. So having the opportunity to just disengage and really use your brain to think what is correct, what is the next step, and just think outside of the box, it gives you that opportunity to balance out. Yeah.
It's awesome. And by the way, the people that don't access social media like hours and hours a day, young people, they're going to have good posture, and the ones that are focused on obsessing about it are going to have huge neck and back problems the rest of their lives, because they're all like, eh.
Right, but do you get pushed as well, right? To the governor's point, you are able to have conversations. You have a level of expectation here, from what I understand. How do you get to where you are when you think about your day-to-day with your instructors and the leadership?
Well, first of all, I'm at the School of Opportunity. I believe that this school has given me the opportunity to get to that point, to push myself. I also think it's the program that I'm in. A lot of the times students in the school and my age don't take advantage of the opportunity that's right in front of them. Like, for example, downstairs, I'm supposed to be in English class, but I'm up here taking advantage of the opportunity and the moment. So a lot of students don't realize that. So because of the business program and because of the business school and everything that I have done business related, it has given me the opportunity and that push to be here right now, and to who knows what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years when I graduate.
Where do you want to go to college?
I'm not sure yet. I started dual enrollment with Doral College, and I want to continue on that path. I really like the charter school and academica system, so I want to continue on that, but just overall kind of exploring my options right now and seeing where I'm going to apply to early next year.
25% of high school juniors, which you are capable of taking college-level work, and about 4% do. That's the system that we need to break up. And if we move to a system that's more customized for the needs of the students and parents, you'll have 25% of the kids that are capable of taking college-level work being able to do so. So, and then you think about, starting, instead of having a 4-year degree measured in 6 years, which is how we measure it now, which is one of those weird things, like an 8th grade level test to graduate from 12th grade is like, we're proud of it. We're proud of a 60% of students graduating with a full-time students graduating with a 4-year degree in 6 years. These are weird, like Alice in Wonderland data points that we should say, if you're a full-time student, you should have the right to graduate with a 4-year degree in 4 years, or 3 years if you could start earlier because the system was designed around you. So you'll have college credit. And then if you go to university, I'm going to shamelessly promote Florida. If you go to any of the public schools here, which are ranked as the best universities now in the country, it's free. It's the Bernie Sanders dream actually happens in one of the more conservative states in the country because we have bright futures, and the state puts up money to make sure that the universities are funded, but the money is rewarded based on outcomes. Another business idea that was implemented after I was governor. So you can provide access to a high-quality education, and kids are graduating now in 4 years more often here than in other places because it's affordable and because they have access to the courses to be able to do it. So don't leave the state.
Exactly. Well, and during your transition, we talked about your transition into your second term as governor. You're the first person to say pre-K 20. Like, why are we talking about K-8, 8, 9, 12? Why don't we create this continuum and erase those lines, those false lines of distinction, so that people actually can dream about that? Now it's finally beginning to happen in a lot of places that have the freedom and flexibility. But too soon.
Again, this is I could see the problem. If you live in a blue state, the unions continue to kind of have the ability to control the natural transformation to a 21st century model, which is more entrepreneurial, more parent-driven. It's just a natural evolution of where we should be. In states that are driven by their politics are driven by public unions, they'll be the last to do it. But I think this is a slow march to something that looks more like the way the world operates now than what it did in 1950. I don't think this is a radical idea anymore.
Gabriella, why don't you ask another question, and then let's ask, should we ask the cohort to join us in asking questions? What do you think? And open it up?
Of course, yes, I agree. To talk a little bit more about you as governor of Florida, how did you balance that relationship between governor and business, and how did those two sectors form and balance out?
The balance is that I come from an entrepreneurial background, and I guess I'm a conservative, so my general attitude was less is better. I don't know, it wasn't that complicated. I tried to, the baseline for the budget, which drives a lot of the policy, was that Florida's income, personal income, should grow faster than the government income. If you start that and you make an estimation of what the years, what the economists say the personal income will be, what your spending should be less than that. And in essence, that's a simple way of saying that government's not going to grow bigger relative to other, families' income. And I tried to adhere to that. And then the rules system, the regulatory system in Florida could always be better for sure, but there's a lot of stupid rules. I mean, they're everywhere. And having a culture to whack stupid rules was part of what we tried to do. There's a lot of vested interests that like stupid rules, and it's hard to do, but we really tried hard to lessen the load for businesses. And then, the rest of it kind of takes care of its place. I mean, like Florida right now has 1,000 people coming in. There's a lot of interesting people moving here, and they're motivated for lots of reasons. But you don't have to create a plan for that. You just have to create the field of dreams, if you will. You got to focus on the long-term things. Like we have, this is a really fascinating place. We have the Biscayne Bay, Atlantic Ocean to the east of us, and to the west, not that far, 10 miles, we have the Everglades. And we have it must be an 80-mile stretch of South Florida. And we've got to protect the water systems on both places for our own use, but more importantly for the natural systems to maintain their beauty, because that's why people come down here. So you got to invest. I mean, we've invested billions of dollars to restore and to protect the Everglades and the water systems in this very fragile peninsula. We've built roads a little better in most states. We could always do better. And our infrastructure is good because we're not spending on the sins of the past. So if you live in Illinois, if you're a public school teacher in Illinois, and the per student funding there is probably double what it is here, but it doesn't get to the classroom because it's all like the obligations. First in line are the people that negotiated a collective bargaining agreement that the legislature and governor signed on with 25 years ago that pays for the health care benefits and pension obligations of people that aren't even in the system anymore. We don't have any of that. So we have this huge advantage, and as long as we protect it, we're going to be fine. What bothers me is that we brag that we're not Illinois. And we're not New York, and we're not California. We kind of do a victory dance on their struggles, and that's just not a good thing to do. Like, I want California to flourish because it's a hugely important part of our country, and New York does the same. And I think you begin to rest on your laurels if you start thinking you're better than somebody else, rather than saying, what can we do that we need to get better at? And we've got things here that we need to fix. So hopefully the environment stays focused on fixing the things that are not working. Property insurance would be the #1 issue here. We've got to figure out a way to protect paradise, and the only way you do that is to insure it. And we can't, we're going to lose our ability to do that if we don't change our laws pretty quick.
Great point. Okay, what do we think? Awardees, questions, thoughts? If you stand up, I will repeat your question. Who you are, where you're from.
I'm Pam Rogers, and I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. My question is, when you were running for governor the second time, how did you get people to connect with your views on education?
It was really going to the 260 schools, and one of the great, Ben Franklin is one of the top 5 Americans, I think, ever, just a Renaissance man. He's kind of like the Winston Churchill of the 18th century and 19th century. The guy did everything, and he had an expression that I try to remind myself of all the time, which is little strokes fell great oaks. It's doing the little things over and over and over and over and over and over, and just relentlessly doing the right thing over and over again. You can change people's perception. You can move the needle in business, in life, in family, across the board. And the standard way of doing it is raise a lot of money, put it on TV, but there isn't that, it's not as sustainable as going to 5 schools without cameras, it's just the cumulative effect of interacting with thousands of people, it turns out, and the organic way that people, people I can remember all the time, like I'd be at Publix after being home for a day in the campaign trail, and someone would come up, typically a teacher, and say, I don't like your views, but I know where you stand. Or I don't like your views, but I know you have a heart for this. It's that personal connection that changed people's, they weren't threatened because I was, back to the rewind the tape, I do think we ought to voucherize the entire public education system, and that's a threatening thing for people in the system, right? So I had to overcome that, and the best way to do it was just relentlessly listening and learning and showing who I was and subjecting myself to people that really thought I was the devil. It takes a lot of work, but it also makes you a better person and a better leader, and it really helped me as governor, because I met a lot of people that I really enjoyed meeting and I learned from, and they trusted me after they met me, and they became part of the effort after I won. And it's just, it's a good way to, if you have the ability to just keep using your little whatever, the little knife or the tiny axe that's just beating down the oak tree and just keep at it, you can change the world.
And didn't you find a lot of people just don't know what they don't know about the issue? And if you take the
Of
time to
course.
talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's where humility comes into play. Your 5-point plan, like you think it's the most important thing in the world, and you have a town hall meeting or whatever, and people don't even know what your 5-point, they don't care, they like, give me a break, like they want to know why it is that their garbage isn't being picked up. Or I did as governor, I did something that now would seem weird, but I gave out my email address, jeb@jeb.org, everywhere I went. I think we totaled up 600,000 emails that I responded to from people emailing me. It turns out that was against the rules of the state. I was not supposed to use a private email for public work, but what are you going to do? I was finished already. So I would get stuff like, and this is how I kept thinking about, my ideas aren't the reason why, the most important thing in the world. There's a lady in Delray Beach that sent me an email. It's like at 10 o'clock at night. I'm answering all these emails before I go to sleep, and she says, "There's a varmint in my attic. What are you going to do about it?" I'm thinking, well, the first impulse would be, the natural one is, like, governors don't deal with this. This is not, like we're above the fray. We don't, that's not our job. So my response was, I'm on it. And the next morning, I get to the office at 7 o'clock. I figure out, someone gives me the number of the city manager of Delray Beach, and I said, "There's a lady. Here's her email address. She has a varmint in her attic. What are you going to do about it? And I'd like to know by noon." And he sent animal control out, which is their job, and responded back saying, "We've done this." And I sent an email to the lady and said, "We did it." It's like, that was more important to her than, my views about charter schools, right? And that's kind of, you got to do both. You got to advance your ideas, advance your cause in a way that draws people towards it, but never lose sight of, in public life at least, you're the servant, not the master. You can't impose anything on anybody for it to be sustainable.
And your power as a governor, and I'm so happy you told that story, because we are constantly saying to the lawmakers we meet with, and they'll say, "Well, that doesn't really, we don't do that," or "I don't have any control over that." I'm like, you pick up the phone, you're the governor, you can make this happen.
Absolutely.
And that's just such a great example. It doesn't have to be in your office.
No, and that was a, what do we call these, that's a learning. I used to say that, I learned that, but now it's a learning. It's a noun, not a verb. And I learned it, or it was a learning that I learned by just opening myself up to as many people as I could by saying, "If you got a problem." We had citizens hours, so we went to all the smallest towns that never saw a governor, like once every 2 months, and we would have, my lieutenant governor was forced to come in one room, and I was in the other room, and we would sit there in 10-minute increments to anybody that came in, and just, they would let us have it. I mean, it was like the wildest thing I've ever, the stuff that goes on in the soft underbelly of American life is, people have real challenges and real problems, and they expect the governor to solve it. Or at least, in many cases, they don't even care if you solve it. They just want you to listen. They just want you to know, that someone cares about their plight. And then, we'd have to do background checks on the fly because some of these people had criminal records and they were worried I was going to get shot or something. And I said, "Look, let's just take our chances here." And the guy, make sure they don't bring a gun into the room, but everybody deserves a chance to be heard. And it was another element of how it forced me to think about, I'm not the master, I'm the servant. And that was really helpful. We created these structure. It wasn't designed. It was another example of something that wasn't in any business plan. I just learned it. I thought it was important. It was an idea that came to me. Everybody scrambled around afterwards to try to implement this crazy idea, and then it became something that was valuable. Now, unfortunately, I don't think successive governors view that as their primary mission, but I had a lot of fun doing it, actually. I'll tell you one more quick story about it. So I'm in McClenny. Everybody knows where McClenny is. It's like 30 miles west of, I'll start speaking like I'm from up there now. 30 miles west of Jacksonville in Baker County. And McClenny, you know, the first person that I see says, my daughter goes to this school, there are too many trucks on the highway, we have to cross the highway, these trucks are putting, you know, their logs, they're sending pine trees up to the mill, and it's very dangerous. So the superintendent of schools, who was a Democrat, I said, well, let's go see it. So we're sitting in this highway, and these trucks are just going like 70 miles an hour. And the elementary school is, you have to cross this 4-lane highway. It looked really dangerous to me, but it turns out, so I called my secretary, the Department of Transportation. I go, God damn, man, we got to put a light on this place. This is crazy. And he goes, let me check. He called the next day. He says, the engineers, doesn't fit the criteria. The engineers say it doesn't fit, doesn't work. And I said, yeah, it's going to work. Send the engineers back to reevaluate this. And after like 3 or 4 times where they were reluctantly, you know, pushing back, they finally said yes. We put the school light up. The community was happy. I would have never known about this had I not been in front of maybe 50 people in one morning. And half of them were talking about, they all organized to make sure I heard that there was a need for a light. And so when I ran for re-election, this lady said, I want to support you for re-election. And I said, well, you're a Democrat, right? And I'm a Republican. You know, get beat up, right? No, I'm ready to do it. So we did a TV ad with her at the light, thanking me for getting the light open, you know, like the light opened, and all these kids were all happy. And it's, you know, sometimes this stuff can be a lot of fun, too.
Other questions? Mike?
Thanks very much, Peter. Mike Morrell from Philadelphia. What do you think is the role of industry in education in a state such as Miami? Outside of the tax credits, what role do you think industry should play in education?
I think the whole career, moving high school particularly to a more career-oriented environment, you know, you talk about AI and the potential. Well, there's going to be a lot of the middle-income jobs are likely to be really wiped out or altered dramatically by AI. But the trades, and then this, you know, computer science, and there's other places where there's going to be a flourishing. So there'll be a lot of dislocations. And the traditional high school is not really designed to deal with all this massive disruption that we're just beginning to see. So creating pathways, in Florida, we have a system, we grade schools A through F. Kind of for consumers, that's a pretty good way of doing it, since people know F's worse than an A. It worked pretty well. But we give bonus points for the schools that have courses that have nationally recognized certificates attached to them. Not perfect, because people game that system as well, but you can envision a system where your accountability system rewards a move towards career, as much focus on career orientation as going to college. The skills required for a career-oriented education are in many cases higher than entry-level college. So I think the objective ought to be, high school ought to be for career and/or college. And so redesigning it to allow for more business-oriented kind of work, I think, is really essential. The other thing, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Cristo Rey system. It's phenomenal. And Miami has opened it up. We've finally got our school here, and Tampa has it. In the rest of the country, it's still growing quite well. But that's where businesses play a really important role, which is they hire, in many cases, they'll hire 5 kids for a day. You know, they'll work a day in the school, and that helps them defer the cost of tuition. And in Florida, you know, you get the $8,800 or $9,000 from the ESA, plus the private involvement, and you can really make a really viable system. And then you're learning what you've already learned in many ways, which is you're going to businesses and you're learning to say, yes, ma'am, how can I help you? Look people in the eye, dress properly. You're incorporating into what would be, business life. And so many kids in this country don't ever have the opportunity to do that. And so there's lots of ways that business can play a really constructive role in supporting education across the board. But I think the career focus, back to the pre-K to 20, kind of model, getting businesses more engaged, not just in community college or technical work after high school, but beginning in high school, I think is an important reform that states are looking at.
So little did you know that the guy who asked the question.
I was guessing.
Actually runs a school where career training is embedded, LaGuardia Academy. How many of you in this room, because it was a huge theme this year, embed a strong career requirement?
Wow, that's
Isn't that
great.
cool? Yeah.
That's exciting.
It was very cool to see, actually, as they all rose to the top, how many of them had that thread that was integrated throughout. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're focused on K-12 here. I would say our community college system needs a little work too. They play such a really important role, but the outcomes there aren't spectacular. And opening up the entire system to allow for innovation to take place, partnering with community colleges or funding private alternatives for degrees that AA and AS degrees would be something that if I was governor right now I would look at.
Anybody else? And where you're from, say your education organization as well.
My name is Mary Lawson. I am from Cafe Momentum in Dallas.
Cafe Momentum.
Yes.
Cool.
So I wanted to pick that up on.
That could be a good name for your cafe.
When you guys come to Dallas, you have to come to Cafe Momentum. It's a restaurant, but it's not your average restaurant. That's what your internship. That's a whole nother spiel. But anyway, my question is, we were talking about the voucher system, and you said Florida is like 65%, almost there. What would you say would be one of the main concerns that the other percentage has about that voucher system? How do we get there?
Yeah, so it's not 65% are taking advantage of what we now call education savings accounts, which Texas will soon have, by the way, finally. Parents choose where their kid goes to school, so they can choose. We have probably the most robust magnet school system in the country. It was all set up by a federal court order for desegregation actually like 40 years ago, and it's now not used for that, but it's used for a choice for parents. We have online education, we have micro schools, we have private schools, we have hybrid schools, we have
Best
charter
charter laws.
schools. We have all these different things. That gets you to 70%. The opponents, like the argument for against shifting this to parents deciding where their kids go to school is the parents who don't care about this is the argument. It's hard to imagine this is like they say this out loud, but they do. The parents that don't care about their kids will be stuck in schools that will be failing. And all the parents that love their kids will move on to other places. We've now been doing this for a long while in Florida, so 98 to 2025, that's a generation at least. And what the data, the research suggests that public schools have gotten better, not worse, because they have to get better. They can't do all the other things that they used to do. Now, we've had the advantage of a growing student population, but that's about to end too. I mean, like Miami-Dade County's school population is declining. We're not going to decline as fast as many of the states that you all are living in, but we're in a baby bust mode here, and the old way of doing things is going to be impossible to sustain. The overhead costs of the old way will force these public education systems to become completely student-centered and focused on student results rather than the whole array of other things they do. So I know the myth is that we destroy public education by empowering parents. The data would suggest Florida's public education has gotten better. I'll give you an example. The NAEP test, which is the nation's report card, we were in 1997, the year before I became governor, or 98 maybe, we were 29th out of 31 on the 4th grade reading test. We back then we would say, thank God for Louisiana and Mississippi. And everybody above us would say, thank God for Florida, Louisiana, and Mississippi. We were at the bottom. We were 50th out of 50 in high school graduation rate. And after we ended social promotion in 3rd grade, we focused on early childhood literacy, we empowered parents with vouchers and expanded charters. We did all this stuff in a 5-year period. We went from 29th out of 31, No Child Left Behind came in, so every state had to take the NAEP test. We went to 6th out of 50. Mississippi embraced the same plan that we did, with a focus on early childhood literacy. They were the place, thank God for Mississippi, they were 50th, and in 3 or 4 years' time, they went above the national average. So empowering parents and then helping public education get better at the same time. You don't abandon it because you're empowering parents. You're focused on helping them compete. You have a better system, and the data suggests that.
So for one last final question, I guess my question for you would be, how would you define success? Because success could be shown in so many different ways, and it's so different for everybody. So in your personal and professional life, how would you define success?
At this stage of my life, I define success in helping others. Like I have a business that my post-failed presidential run, so it's how many years? 16 to 20. I've been doing this 7 years, and we've built a really cool business. And I'm the founder of it, but I'm kind of the chief cultural officer. And I'm trying to embed in just the basic culture of the business that the first impulse every time we interact with any potential client, potential investor, potential partner, potential company is, how can we help? Like, I'm training myself to say that, and then I'm helping others have that as their first impulse. And I find it's a little late in life to have insights like this, and maybe I had it and I just didn't think about it as much. But I think it is where you find purpose, and it's uniquely where you find success in almost every aspect. If you had to pick the one thing that really would be important in business, politics, family, friendships, across the board, it would be start the day and end the day with, how can I help you?
Governor, thank you for reminding us that lifelong learning is truly lifelong, and the lessons that you've taken from your public and private life. It's been a pleasure, as usual, having you here. Please join me in
Gabrielle, good luck to
welcoming.
you.